Wait, what about this part?
Shh. Welcome to TBR, a podcast where two besties read. I'm Addi.
And I'm Alex, and join us as we reread,
review,
and reevaluate our favorite books over the years.
Shh, I'm reading.
Join us this week as we tackle Jonathan Stroud's Lockwood Company, The Screaming Staircase. We are looking into The Ghost, Part 1, Chapters 1 through 4. Hey, hi, hello, and welcome to our first episode of TBR, or Two Besties Read. We're so excited you're here. My name is Addi, and I am joined by my bestest friend in the whole wide world, Alex. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Addi. Thanks for asking. I have my energy drink with me, and I am sitting on my chair, all ready to go.
Not a Diet Coke?
No, okay, I have some in the fridge, but I needed a little extra energy for this first episode because I'm nervous.
Well, also, we are working gals, so this is like not
true.
a full-time job. This is literally just because we are always talking about books together, and we really wanted to bring up the big questions and fangirl about our favorite books and series.
Yes.
Well, I'm over here with my tea. I was trying to be very fitting for this episode. I have an Earl Grey tea.
Wow. The Lockwood crew would appreciate that.
I think they would. I was trying to go with like a theme for what book we're covering this week. I say this week. It's going to be like a year. You realize that?
It's going to be a long time.
It's going to be the long haul, but we're committing. We're really excited to get started on this series.
Yeah, we say a year like it's a bad thing. We're very excited.
I'm really excited to deep dive into this book because we already talked about it a little bit, but this is like, we're doing it legit.
Yeah, legitimate deep dive. Speaking of deep dive, the chapters that we're covering this episode will be chapters 1 through 4. Those are the chapters in part 1, The Ghost. We plan to release episodes bi-weekly. Life kind of gets in the way sometimes. But we will be posting the chapters that we're going to read beforehand, so feel free to follow along as we read.
This is not a new novel. It came out in 2013 and was written by Jonathan Stroud, which, what a king. And this is a great young adult series. And yes, we are well aware that we are adults. However, this is the fun thing about these two best friends that you're listening to on this podcast. We love the young adult fiction.
It's our bread and butter.
Yeah, they're our bread and butter. And that's why we really enjoyed talking to each other about these books. It's because we're the only people that really read them, we feel like. But yeah. But there are 5 books in the primary series and a short story in between 2 and 3, I think. And then there's also a TV series that was adapted by Netflix, which is kind of the reason we found out about the series.
We do 100% plan on doing a comparison, a couple episodes to the TV series just to compare the books and see how accurate it was and what changes we liked. We do have to mention that the writers and actors guilds are currently on a strike, so we won't be able to post any of those when we eventually do get to it until the strikes are resolved. Please pay your writers and actors livable wages. That's really important.
We are covering Lockwood Company now, and then afterwards we might start another book series that we love. Maybe Percy Jackson, maybe The Hunger Games. We've got a huge list. So we will be fangirling over our favorite moments, joking around about the hypothetical situations, and debating the correct answers to what-if questions. And starting off with our first question, Alex, how did you get into the Lockwood Company series?
Okay, let me preface. Usually I am a read the book, then watch the movie/TV show person. In this case, it was the complete opposite. Scrolling through Netflix, saw that the TV series popped up. It had been in my, recommended for you, So I started to watch it, fell in love with it, and then actually started talking to you about it. And you said that there was a book series. So then I quickly bought all the books and read them multiple times and then rewatched the series. And that is how I fell into it. How did you fall into the Lockwood universe?
I had one day where I had half a day off of work and I got home and I was just so exhausted because it was a week. And it popped up on Netflix and I binged it in one sitting. And it's really hard for me to binge a TV show in one sitting. I can do that with movies. TV shows, it's very rare. I absolutely loved the story, and I ended up watching it twice. The funny story is I was telling my brother, oh my gosh, you should really check out this TV show. I think you'd like it. And it was like a little kid on Christmas. He was like, they made a TV series of that book series? And I was like, wait, what? And I totally realized. But my brother had read it when he was little, absolutely loved that series. He carried that book around with him all the time. So yeah, I totally remembered this book series. And he would leave it just lying around the house, and it would just be sitting around this crap. So then I decided I obviously have to read this book series. Then finding out that there were 5 books in the series, I was pumped. And I just totally ripped through them. But my favorite story, Alex, is when we did our monthly video call. And we had that awkward, oh, how are you doing? I'm good. How are you? Yada, yada. And I finally said, okay, Alex, I have to be honest. That Lockwood Co series I was talking about, I've rewatched the show too many times, and I'm already halfway through the 3rd book. And you said, oh girl, I'm already at the end of book 5. So automatically knew, great, we're on the same page with the series.
God. So with that, let's kind of jump into our synopsis. So like I said earlier, we're covering part 1, The Ghost, which covers chapters 1 through 4. And during these chapters, we're introduced to 2 of our 3 main characters. We meet Lucy Carlisle and Anthony Lockwood. And we only hear mentions of our 3rd character in the trio, George Cubbins, which is mind-blowing because he is an integral character. Obviously, he's one of the trio. So it's crazy that in this first part of the book, we don't even see him at all. And while our 2 main characters are getting introduced to their first case, we hear a little more about the rumblings, and the foundation is laid about the problem, which is in quotes there, capital P for problem, where it's a modern-day London is where this book is set, but it's plagued with visitors about 50 years ago.
And we also get an outline of the different defenses used to ward off ghosts, some hints at the different levels of ghosts, and also some rules that the different agencies have to live by. While it isn't really spelled out plainly, here's a manual of everything you need to know, I think Jonathan Stroud does a fantastic job at weaving it into the narrative of the different devices that they need. And I'm not a huge horror, scary movie, supernatural fan, so when they're using iron, I was like, yeah, sure, iron. That'll do it. That's totally important. But they go through the typical items they use to combat ghosts.
Yeah, so you got like salt bombs, some iron, magnesium flares. You really got the whole...
They got those rapiers.
Oh, yeah.
They look really cool.
Fancy swords. You got fancy swords.
I want them to be swords that look like Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride.
Yes.
You know, like, you haunt my house.
Prepare to die.
Okay. Also, we in these chapters, we do meet our very first ghost. And it's not their first case that they've worked on, but it is the first time we see them on a case.
Yes.
Which I think is interesting. I think it's good that it's not their first case that we're on, because obviously the first case is not going to be representative of all their cases. This is just the first one we see. So they've kind of ish. I say ish because having read the rest of the series, we know how this goes. But they've ish worked out their kinks and how they're going to be able to work with each other, what they're best at.
Yeah, I really like it because it enforces that they already have this pre-existing friendship. And I really just appreciate that we don't have to start on the very first case that they have working together, because then we don't have to see all of the awkward interactions of them learning how to work as a functioning agency. Instead, we just kind of get this snapshot of how they are as Lockwood Co.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now's the time when we get into each chapter, into the nitty-gritty details. Let's go. So starting off with chapter 1, but we're not going to start with chapter 1. I want to start with the foreword. And I was determined to read every inch of this book, so I personally really liked this foreword. It was so heartwarming, especially if you had seen the TV series before reading this book. But entirely, he talks about all his characters and why he gave them all the tools that he did. And did it make you cry? It made me cry.
It didn't make me cry, but I am glad I read it. I know this is bad book etiquette. I usually skip like preambles and forewords, notes from the author, because I get so excited to read the book that I'm like, who cares? Who cares what you have to say? Let me just get into the story.
I care, Alex. I care.
I know. I'm glad I read it because, oh man, there is some heartwarming stuff in here.
Jonathan Stroud goes through how he constructed this novel, where the original idea came from. And I think the coolest part is him really saying what he gave his characters to fight these ghosts. And the part that just made me go, my heart.
It's the last paragraph, right?
The last paragraph, but sadly
Yes.
when he says that the most important thing he gave his heroes were each other, and also Portland Row.
I freaking love it.
and obviously if you read any young adult fiction, you know that whether it's Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, or in this case Lockwood Co, you have your trio, and that is always the driving force of the story, is the relationship between those three. And I just love it. I will always cry about it.
I love it. Literally, like, the last sentence.
Oh, yeah.
So good. It talks about shadows and light and how everyone needs each other. So freaking good. Talented author.
I totally agree. Okay, let's dive into chapter 1. So Lockwood and Lucy show up at the house that they're going to take care of, which is on 62 Sheen Road. And already, off the bat, the exchange between Lockwood and Lucy just sets up so perfectly their character dynamic, where Lockwood is not really taking this as seriously as he should, and Lucy's once again reminding him that you can't impersonate the clients.
That is such a huge thing about Lockwood in these books, that it's constantly brought up that he does impersonate the clients and, like, has all these accents, and he's horrible at them. So I'm glad that, like, it's established in book 1. The first thing we hear is Lucy being all responsible, being like, Lockwood, please don't. Please don't. We've been chased before. Don't do it.
Also, I think it's very fun because their dynamic is very much into the bickering, and that's a trope that I really love, where they're able to play with each other and give each other a hard time, and even call each other out when they're doing something stupid, which happens a lot with this duo. Always Lockwood is doing something stupid and Lucy's calling him out, and he does not care.
God, I just love how sassy they are, because then they're like, okay, let's sense out the property before anything happens. And then Lockwood's just so sassy with it, and he's like, you know, there was a death in this yard. And obviously Lucy knows exactly where this is going, because she's like, is it small? Was it a mouse? Basically.
Let's be real here. Which also, I have a question for you, because he brings up that something died there, and he says it's small, and maybe I missed this, but how long do death glows last? They might have brought it up, but sometimes Lockwood is bringing up that a death glow is so bright, and other times he says it's very faint.
Okay, I have this exact question, because it's established here that there is a death of probably a mouse or some mouse-like rodent creature, right? And obviously it was like, I don't know, a brutal death because a cat got it. So is it only vicious deaths that cause a death glow? And is it small because it was small in size? Or in the grand scheme of the universe, is it small? And can that mouse come back?
And on that same point, if it's a very violent death, does it last longer?
Yeah, does that mean it's brighter? Because Lockwood also carries around sunglasses. And it's established that the problem started about 50 years ago. So that's when people started seeing ghosts. But some of the ghosts are way older than that, because they're from wars and all of that. Plagues.
So how long are these death glows lasting? Because this is not like an American city where, oh, it's only been around for like 100 years. Like, no, London's been around for a long time, man.
Yeah.
Like, how is Lockwood not blind from all these death glows?
And, like, could you imagine, like, I don't know, would you be embarrassed if your death glow was not as bright as someone else's? Like, in the grand scheme of things, like, wow, it's not as bright.
Gosh. Alex, yours would glow so bright.
Oh, thanks. Really,
you're so
really
special.
vicious death there.
Alex, if my death glow was really bright, would you ghostbusters seance and try to talk to me?
Yeah. I mean, our ghosts would be hanging out, obviously. We'd probably be doing a podcast.
Oh my gosh. From the other side. Do ghosties read?
Oh my God. Yes. TGR.
TGR. Tune in next week on TGR as we dive into who is Scooby-Doo.
Oh, don't even get me started on Scooby-Doo. You know I love Scooby-Doo.
I know. Okay, we gotta move on.
Okay.
So Lockwood and Lucy arrive at the house. The person they're supposed to meet isn't there, but they see a moving shape in the window.
Typical spooky vibes, right? You think that you're seeing the person in the house and no one's in there.
Yes, typical scary movie, kind of puts you on edge as a reader. And we are then introduced to the daughter of the person that owns this house. Her name is Susie Martin. I think. Yeah.
Susie Martin.
And Susie Martin automatically is just not impressed with this crew. Automatically, from her first line, you can tell this lady does not trust kids to do the job. which is frankly hilarious because the only people that can do the job are children.
Yes, there was a line that was in there that just was kind of a throwaway line that's like, basically, adults as a whole view these agents with distrust, resentment, uncertainty, and dread. And that's just how they view everyone that can see these ghosts. So it's like, do they not trust these agents because they can't see what they see, or because that they're mad that this is the world that they're in now, where they're obviously not able to handle the problem, but kids can't?
There's also a line that made me roll my eyes, but also go, this is so relatable, is when the lady's like, oh, I feel sorry for your generation. What a world we had to live up in. I'm like, wow, I've never heard that before in my life.
Me too, lady.
It's just, I hear that all the time. And so, I mean, we've heard that growing up, and even us in like our 20s, we hear this all the time.
Well, like even in not to date this podcast, but even in the COVID times, you know, adults had never had to wear masks or had all these mandates.
Yeah.
And kids did. So it's kind of just the way it is. You know, it's a bummer for the kids that didn't get to go to school and had to graduate online because they didn't have in-person stuff. And how people are just like, oh, that's horrible for you guys. But the kids are just kind of like, it is what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which also, I know we're not doing a full comparison to the show, but I think it's interesting that in the show, the lines when they're talking to Susie Meyerson, which in the show they're talking to Miss Hope, but in the show they've reversed Lucy and Lockwood's lines to how they are in the book.
I did find that really interesting because here it lends different character traits to these characters. So in the TV show, it kind of made Lucy seem a little more rebellious, while Lockwood seemed a little more of the leadership approach. And then this way it's kind of the opposite, you know?
I agree. I think it's an interesting take that the TV show goes on because since we're focusing on the book, spoiler alert, Lockwood and Lucy have these character personality arcs that almost switch and build upon each other as the novels go on. Initially, Lockwood is reckless and impulsive, and he'll dive headfirst into danger and is likely to throw the rulebook out the window. However, Lucy, in the books at least, is the person to follow the rules when possible in order to survive. She takes her time to think things through before she goes on, and really focuses on keeping herself and the ones that she loves safe. And this is something that you get from the first page where Lucy is telling Lockwood, you can't impersonate the client.
Yeah.
You can't burn anything down. She doesn't really say that, but you get the point. But she's more cautious. And as the novels progress, they learn from each other and they inherit those traits from the other. So again, I just think it's an interesting take that the TV show has, already switching those personality traits from the get-go, but we won't get into that anymore. That's my soapbox. I'm stepping down.
Right. Okay, so after meeting Susie Martin and kind of hearing about the house, basically the first case is that Miss Hope, that's the client, her husband and her had owned the house for a while. They rearranged some stuff, basically, as Mr. Hope started to work from home. All of a sudden, he died. She found him at the bottom of the stairs. And there have been some paranormal rumblings around the house. So now she wants to sell it. She refuses to even go in the house anymore, which is why we're meeting her daughter. So that's basically all the information we get.
This is also the part where we get to see their talents for the very first time. And Lockwood asks Lucy if she can hear anything since her specialty is listening. And Lucy asks him if he can see anything since his is sight. And then the super creepy part happens where it's a typical creepy moment where everything is really quiet. And then something sounds like it's falling down the stairs. And I can't help but laugh at afterwards when Lucy jumps back in surprise and Lockwood's just like, you good?
Yeah, he's just sitting there because he can see a death glow at the bottom of the stairs. So obviously they both know where that's happened. That lines up with what the client gives them. But while Lockwood just sees it, Lucy feels it and experiences it because she is just so in tune as a listener to the noises and the emotions that happened.
Also, another question, and it's kind of related to the death glows, but how long can you hear things? Because I feel like Lucy is always mentioning in the novels that she can hear whispers of different things. But again, how long are those noises there? Because London's an old city.
That is a good question that I wish I had an answer to.
Also, can she just really just shut it off?
That's true. And especially, how does she pull out? Because if we're talking about this conversation, for example, I am recording myself, you are recording yourself, and then we're listening to each other. But you can pull the different strains of audio, right? So you can pull my recording where I'm just talking and not hear you. And then you can pull your recording where you're just talking and you can't hear me. Is that how it is with the source? So like if she's just trying to hear the ghost, it's just that person having like a one-ended conversation like in their life and the noises that they only made, or is it the totality of their life?
Oh, yeah. I wonder if it's the feeling when you're just kind of like zoning out for a second.
It just turns into a hum.
Yeah, and I guess that's the only thing I could like actively compare the listening skills to is like being in a room where there's a lot of people talking at the same time and you don't even know where to focus. You're just hearing noise. And then sometimes if you really like close your eyes and focus, you can hear one conversation. It's always one of those random conversations of like, and they were roommates, you know, like one of those kind of conversations. Well, you know what I mean, but you know, when you're surrounded by a lot of people, but you can focus into that one conversation.
Oh, 100%. That is literally one of my favorite things to do when I go out to dinner is just like, say there's people sitting around. You're like, let me just zone out and listen to the most interesting conversation. It's always someone on the first date, and you're just like, ooh, it's not going well.
Oh, always. Yeah.
So Lucy's just an eavesdropper.
You overheard my date?
Yeah, how did you know? It's just me in the corner listening.
Okay, so now we are in chapter 2, and I would just like to say I'm crossing out every single time it says cookie, and I'm going to write biscuit, because we are in England, damn it.
Okay, I'm doing the opposite. I am, as an American, making it all about me, and I am switching out tea bags for Diet Coke, my drink of choice. And I'm keeping the cookie because that's what I want.
You were lame. This is, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, One Best Friend.
Excuse me, your ghost is going to be alone in the afterlife.
It's going to be dark. That's what your ghost is going to be. You're going to have no death glow. I'm not going to hear, no one's going to hear your voice.
No, because I'm going to die because of my Diet Coke addiction. So I'm not even going to have a death glow.
Is your source going to be the empty Diet Coke bottle?
You know, I've thought about what my source could be. A Diet Coke bottle has crossed my mind. God.
Oh my goodness.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Oh my goodness. Also, we just have to shout out. I say we. I have to shout this out if you're not going to shout out. The absolutely iconic burn.
Talk about the information. Because adults can't see ghosts. They can really only feel sensations. So the only information that they got from Mrs. Hope, besides the whole, my husband died after we rearranged furniture and all that, is that there was
a moving shape. Which I laughed so hard at this because she's so... Okay, actually, I need to go back. That's not the burn I was talking about.
No, you're not talking about the sarcastic versus irony?
I am, but this is before it. This is before. Okay, the moving shape is after.
Dang.
Okay, so this is a sarcastic or ironic. But basically, Lockwood and Lucy are talking about the information that they got and how useful it is. And Lockwood's being very sarcastic, but he asks, I'm being ironic, or is it sarcastic? I can't remember. And Lucy says, irony's clever. You're probably being sarcastic.
Yeah, Lucy is a sass master.
She really is. I love her with all my heart and soul. I wish I had her sassiness. I really do. So now they start reading through the case file, and this is another iconic, hilarious part where Lockwood is asking Lucy, what did Miss Hope say she saw? And Lucy, you can picture it. It doesn't actually happen in the books, but her just pulling out a scroll, like saying, like, here
she makes a big show out of it, like unfolds it, spreads out the creases, makes a whole big deal, and then says...
She's been like one of those gestures in Princess movie, pulling out the scroll, like, hear
and, like,
ye.
unrolls, like...
And she pulls it out and says, hear ye, hear ye.
Clears throat.
A moving shape.
And then rolls it back up.
Yeah. And then he goes, that's it? She goes, yeah.
Word for word.
And also, I'm going to get on my soapbox again. I want to talk about something I noticed with Lockwood and Lucy's characters that are introduced in this chapter and continuously pop back up as the series continues. Stroud, I think, does a really great job in which talents he gives his characters, specifically in what they specialize in. So Lockwood's gift is primarily sight, and Lucy's is listening. And I think you see these gifts are also reflected in their personalities and how they behave in their relationships with others. In this chapter, we are already seeing that Lockwood is more of a spur-of-the-moment kind of guy. He thinks on his feet, doesn't follow the rules, and is great at formulating a plan after he's seen what the threat is. So when he sees something is going wrong with the case, he's usually the first person to pipe up and put a new plan into action. And you see that he's usually pretty perceptive with seeing when people aren't comfortable in a case, and he's continuously asking, making sure they're okay the whole time. For example, there's a part in chapter 3 or 4, I forget exactly where, but Lucy jumps back after facing the ghost, and he's immediately asking, "Are you okay? Are you sure?" And he asks her so many times, and side note, what a king.
What a young adult.
What a man. We stan. Lucy, on the other hand, is great at listening to others. She will try and read behind the lines, whether in a good way or a bad way, as we see later in the series.
Yep.
But primarily in these first few books, we see that she's very cautious because she listens to the dangers and the rules that they need to follow. And I think that's where you start to see the character traits of Lockwood and Lucy really complement each other in a great way. But it will often lead to them butting heads and arguing about the best way to move forward, especially in their leadership styles. But, in conclusion for my soapbox, Lockwood is literally better at seeing things and processing what to do, and Lucy is better at the listening side of that. So,
Yeah.
down off my soapbox.
She does make often snap judgments on these people that is often wrong. Like, we see it a little bit later when we first meet our ghost. She does make this whole, like, generalization based on this ghost just by looks alone, not even bringing her listening into it. So it's just, yeah, you're completely right. It's really interesting.
And along with that, this case also challenges Lucy to really, think about her snap judgments with her listening skills and also her sight skills. By really truly listening to the ghost, then she is able to, metaphorically, see more than Lockwood can.
Yeah. I think that comes into play a little bit later, too, especially in the later books, because we do establish that, like, our third character, George, is really interested in the problem itself and how it came to be and what the motivations are. And Lucy's interested in ghosts as well. Like, she likes to hear the story. Whereas Lockwood, based on his history and some secrets that we uncover, is very much just find the ghost, find the source, snuff it out. He doesn't care about what happened or why. He just wants to deal with the issue instead of delving into it emotionally almost.
And I think that's what makes it such an interesting dynamic between these characters. But I digress. Moving on. I do love that Lockwood is consistently reminding us that he is a child. And I think it's good because it keeps us grounded in realizing that these are kids.
Yeah, 100%.
For example, Lockwood and Lucy are walking up the stairs, and Lockwood shouts, "Look, it's Mr. Hope!" And Lucy just jumps back, thinking it's the ghost, but it's just a picture of him, and Lockwood's just like, "Oh yeah, Miss Hope's here too."
He's just commenting on it, very chill, and she's like, "You idiot, we're supposed to be focused."
And then we get to the really good part that just cracks me up, which this is like it in the TV show, which I love. But again, it's in reinforcing that Lucy is the one that really likes to follow the rules, and Lockwood just doesn't care, is when they realize they forgot the chains.
Yeah, that's an essential piece of the kit there that every agent has, as is noted. Like, how the hell do you forget? It'd be like walking out, I think they say walking out without pants. Like, it's essential. And Lockwood forgot it because he's distracted.
Which I just laugh because, you know me, I don't watch any scary movies. I don't watch any supernatural stuff. And so when I was watching the show and reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, that's bad. They totally forgot the chains. Yeah. It's gotta mean something.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's really bad. And then when you get more into the series, you're like, oh yeah,
That's awful.
that's really
Yeah.
effing bad. Like,
Literally. And they're already like, it's 6 o'clock when they're in the kitchen. So it's progressing as the night. And as it's established, as the night goes on, visitors do get stronger. Because it wouldn't be scary otherwise if they were strong during the day. And as they're moving on in the house, they've already cleared the bottom floor. They're moving upwards. It starts to get a little bit colder. Lucy's picking up on some tapping, some scratching, which is horrifying to hear.
side note, again, I don't watch supernatural stuff, but ever since they're like, oh, the tapping. I have a place that taps in my apartment. Do you realize how many times a night I wake up and go, oh, there's a ghost? Like,
I think you're in a haunted apartment and we should deal with that.
I would like to move on to chapter 3.
Yeah.
But anyway, they see the ghost. That's where it leaves off.
Yes. Chapter 3 is so scary to start. Lucy starts out experiencing what they call ghost lock, which basically is you feel numb, you can't move, your brain is numb and you feel like you have no strength. You feel really sad and like paralyzed and that nothing's ever going to be good again. And she's just standing there staring at a ghost. Horrifying.
I try to find an equivalent feeling to what the character's feeling. And for me, I'm like trying to think of what that feels like to feel that ghost lock where you're just so scared.
Let me tell you, I have experienced this.
What? Like
Not
with an
with
actual
the
ghost?
Not with a ghost. I don't think I've ever told this story. Okay, let me set the scene.
Oh my goodness.
Young Alex is decorating the tree for Christmas.
Oh.
And it is one of those artificial trees because I have allergies.
Did you electrocute yourself?
No. Oh my God. That'd be horrifying. No, I was scared shitless. Basically, I was setting up the tree and you have to connect like the pieces of the tree together and then the lights were pre-attached. So I just had to plug them in. So I am under the tree completely. You can see nothing but my feet. And I'm listening to Christmas music. I'm alone. My family's out doing something. And I'm getting the tree together because that's what I do. I like to decorate. And all of a sudden, I hear steps. Creaking steps. And my only thought is, I'm home alone. There's someone in the house. And they're getting closer and closer. I snatch my feet under the tree. And I'm just sitting there being like, oh my God, there's an intruder in the house. What the fuck am I supposed to do? I'm just sitting there. You know what it was? I was listening to a holiday mix on my mom's iPod. And you know what song was playing? Michael Jackson's The Thriller, which starts out with creeping steps down the hallway. I thought I was going to get murdered laying under a Christmas tree. And I was just paralyzed there, being like, this is how I end. Under a tree.
Meanwhile, out comes Michael Jackson moonwalking like,
So I know exactly what Lucy was experiencing when she was paralyzed staring at this ghost.
oh, okay. Yeah, if that's what we're comparing Ghost Lock to, then yeah, I've been there many times.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like something I want to experience. Let me just say that.
No. And then we get to the funny part where Lucy's like, Lockwood, oh, Lockwood, you know, over and over again. And he's just like, oh, I got some here, man. It's really good. And she's like trying to get him to listen. Once again, going back to my soapbox, that Lucy's really good at listening and Lockwood is just not.
Typical man, distracted, doing his own thing while Lucy's trying not to freak out the ghost by showing any emotion. So she can't just yell at him like, Lockwood, get in here now. She has to be all cool and collected. And he's just like, I'm busy. I'm doing something. Lucy's well aware that this type 2 ghost is not the husband and is not just your average ghost. Meanwhile, Lockwood's like, looks like they moved some furniture in the other room. And oh, there's a death glow. It's really faint. There must have been a violent death. Lucy's staring at the ghost victim, being like, yeah, I know. Let's go. Yeah. And she also hears it the first time, too, I think.
Yeah, it keeps saying it's lost and cold. And then we're starting to trust this ghost, thinking, oh, they're not so bad. And then, dead.
That is exactly how I read it. You know, in the movie, it would be like the jaw unhinges and it like, rah!
Yeah, yeah. The part where I turn off the movie, usually.
Yeah, like, exactly. The part where I hide under a blanket and look through my fingers.
Yep. Ghost starts floating towards Lucy, is attacking her. Lockwood springs up and, you know, starts fighting it out with the rapier. You know, little Inigo Montoya action there.
Yeah, just your average sword play with a ghost. You know.
And then right after that, this is the part where I was telling you, we stand this king. He's continuously checking up on her this whole time. Like, are you okay? Did it touch you? You need to relax. Are you okay?
I think this is the first time that we've really seen Lockwood be a quote-unquote leader. Because before, when he was talking to the client, when they were in the kitchen, he was kind of being reckless and making jokes and not being serious. But this is the first time that we've seen him be serious and give Lucy an out and be like, if we want to call it, we can. Obviously, it's a type 2 ghost. We don't have the right equipment. You're in an emotional space. We can leave if you want. And he does give her that option, which I think is one of the few times that we see him, like, stop everything and just check in and be like, yo. I do kind of like, I know that we said that we don't ever meet George in this first 4 chapters, because we don't. But we do get little rumblings and mentions of him. And they do paint a pretty clear picture, like, George advised us not to go. He wanted to do more research, so George is responsible and careful. George wouldn't approve of us staying. I do like that they just kind of sprinkle those in to give you an intro to George before we even meet him.
Yeah. Which, before that part,
Oh, did you see where they called him like a gremlin or something?
Yes. But I really love the part before it when they're bickering like an old married couple.
Oh, God. I love it because you know in any friendship you are giving each other that, like, harsh truth. You're razzing each other. And I just love the bickering that they do.
It's just so funny. And she once again digs at him about the iron chains. And he's like, well, come on, Lucy. Like, you can't blame me. And she's like, yeah, I can. I'm going to in this moment. This wouldn't be happening.
After they make the decision to stay on the case, because Lucy's afraid that they would get kicked off otherwise, they do find where that ghost went to after it attacked them. It went into the study. And that's where they think that the probable source would be. And that's the end of chapter 3. Then we move into chapter 4, where it does talk a little bit more about sources. Basically, the source is what ties the visitor to the world, basically. So whether it's organic remains is what they call it, like a body, or something that meant a lot to the ghost, like a prized possession, that's what the agents have to find and neutralize with salt and sulfur in order to remove that ghost and stop their influence. So that's really what they're looking for in the wall.
Yeah, which there is a section where they talk about why sources have a ghost tied to it, and they bring up that in most cases, it's because of these personal organic remains. And again, back to the death glows and the whispering that we were talking about. If the death glow is going to be really bright, is that because the personal organic remains left on it or not?
I am so curious because we saw that there was a faint death glow, right? In the room that they're in the study. That's what Lockwood was looking at earlier. And then we find the remains in the wall, and it's clearly a whole body. They've said that. So I just think it's so interesting that, like, you can have a death glow that's not exactly in the same spot as the remains, and the remains can still be there. The source can be in a different location. So it really gives, I think, more work to the agents, because now they have to decipher all of these clues and able to find out, like, where the source even is. You do see them kind of playing to their strengths. Lucy being the responsible one, she's the one kind of watching the room for the ghost, and she is more sensitive, as was mentioned earlier by Lockwood. So she's watching the room for the ghost and making sure that the filings are in that circle so that they're not at risk. Where Lockwood's, you know, being his reckless self and is driving ahead with the mission and attacking the wall, trying to get to the inside of that chimney.
And Lockwood also, again, is just being hilarious. And he says something that I even read it and went, excuse me, sir?
Do you mean where he says that she's the weak one?
Yes! And I was like, sir, I just gave you the we stand king status. I am willing to revoke that.
Yeah, I was like, first of all, you never call a woman weak. And you also do not call her emotional, because those are negative words, sir.
And I like that she was like, excuse me?
Yeah, I do like, while this ghost is causing all sorts of mayhem and havoc in the house, she's like, excuse, what? Do you want to explain yourself?
And Lockwood was just like baiting on the ghost, going like, boring.
Yeah, he's taunting it. Show us something new. I would be freaking out. And he's just run-of-the-mill ghost. Stop slamming the doors.
And then I annotate my books. There's, as I call, a purple section. And the purple, it means like, oh man, I really like the writing, or I really like this moment. It just felt like, ah. But there's a really good scene of the ghost coming towards her. The magazines are flipping everywhere, and books are moving everywhere, and it feels like all this stuff is rising up, and it's looking like birds. And it's just very visual in the moment because you can picture it. Like, you can see that this is happening. And that all this stuff is moving, but looks like she's motionless.
I highlighted that line. I thought that was a really strong visual dialogue. You just know the feeling behind that ghost's eyes when she's staring straight through Lucy.
It almost feels like this ghost is really trying to connect with her in a way, but it doesn't know how.
Because no one's listening to it. I thought the description of the ghost from a little bit earlier was a little harsh. Where she's like, this ghost was pretty. This ghost was prettier than me and probably was one of those girls that I don't like. And like goes into all of that. I was like, woo, Lucy, yikes. Should be women helping women, even if those women are ghosts.
And this is where the ghost is floating over Lockwood and Lucy's freaking out a little bit.
Because they fell out of the filings. The shock of seeing the body made them fall. And then the ghost, of course, is like, oh, hey, nice. It starts attacking. And then Lucy overreacts a little bit. And Lucy throws some Greek fire in a room full of paper. You know what I imagine for Greek fire? I imagine the Greek fire in the Percy Jackson books where it's like once it starts on fire, you cannot put it out. That is all I could imagine. And I was like, you're throwing that in a room full of magazines, Lucy. Oh my God.
I don't know about you, but all I could think of in this moment is that comedian James Acaster, I think is how you say his name. And he was on that special episode of the Great British Baking Show. And he's baked this dish and it has gone horrendously. Yeah. And he presents his final dish and it's a disaster, like a total disaster. And the judges ask him to explain his dish, and he says, well, started baking it, had a breakdown, bon appetit.
Okay, I do. There's a clip of that floating out. I do know what you're talking about.
Just, in that moment, when I, read this scene, I was like, oh my God, they are that moment. They're just like,
Yep.
Well, we, got rid of a ghost, burned down a house. Problem solved.
Yeah. Lit a house on fire. Whatever.
Ghost is gone.
Yeah. Bon appetit. They should have waited till they got more research, but that's okay.
True.
Now the house is on fire.
And now Lucy is going to throw a silver net over the body to contain the source. The one thing that stands out for her is the gold chain necklace.
I highlighted this blue, which is sad.
Oh.
Really basic. Just a little necklace hanging there that a girl had put on, trying to make herself look nice, and just is still there a long time later after she's dead. It just makes me really sad to think about that. It's been established that this ghost is a type 2 because it was able to ghost lock her. And I think it was said earlier that type 2 ghosts always have a reason for coming back, and it's usually vengeance or some motivation like money or greed, whatever. She's looking at this ghost source, the body, realizing that it's probably a murder victim and connecting to it and trying to she just has that instant why did this happen? Why are you here? What's your motivations? Whereas Lockwood's just cover it with the net and let's get on with it. Snuff it out. And I just think that's really sad.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, she takes the necklace.
That one uncorrupted reminder of what the living girl had been.
But what if it was a different object? What if it was in our time? What if it was an AirPod?
Ew, I would not be grabbing that out of somebody's ear. Tell me that.
And what if it was like a coin? I don't think it would be the same.
I don't think it would. I think the necklace, I don't know. I think just the imagery of that girl putting on a necklace. Also, necklaces, I guess, do have a further theme in these books. Not to spoil. But
oh, man, that is a good point.
I didn't even think about that till right now. Dang.
Hello, listeners. This is now the Alex show.
Killing it.
I just sit here as a fly on the wall and I'm amazed, but what's new?
Yeah, ghost is gone. House on fire. Stolen jewelry. I think we've covered all three options.
Ghost gone. House on fire. Bon appetit.
So this episode just ends with the last bit where the house is on fire. And the last thing we see is them jumping. Or falling, more accurately.
Which, did you also just love the imagery of them falling?
I highlighted it pink for because I loved it. I just think that the suspended between life and death was such a very accurate phrase for both their relationship and their life.
It's ironic because they're children, so they should be the furthest from death, but here they are the closest to death.
Yeah, they should be on the strictly life spectrum, but literally they have all these psychic connections to ghosts, and in a way they are mediums, so they're really spanning the two worlds there.
Yeah, so it's a great visual, and it's a great way to end this first part. All right, now that we have finished all the chapters, we are on to the what if portion of our podcast, where, let's be honest, Alex comes up with questions that I'm like, I didn't think of that. All right, Alex, throw it at me.
Okay, our what if question for this week. What if it was George and Lucy investigating this case and not Lockwood and Lucy?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think they would have had the chains, okay? They wouldn't have left the chains at home. Let's be real. George wouldn't have left. They would have known what they were getting into a little bit more, so they would have been more prepared. If George didn't know what they were going into and they got there, which that wouldn't have happened because George researches everything. George is the person that researches everything. He's very thorough, and I don't think he'd ever go into a case without getting as much information as possible. But if on the off chance he didn't get the information for this case, and there was that decision again that Lucy and Lockwood had of do you want to stay? Are you okay? We should go home. I think George really would have forced her hand to leave.
I agree. George obviously does his research, and in the case that he doesn't, I think he would be propelled by that need to figure out what they're going up against, because he doesn't take unnecessary risks like Lockwood does, not like Lucy does too. I think they would have left and just said, like, screw it to the case.
But because we're being realistic to George's character, and he would have researched everything ahead of time, and they would have gone and prepared, brought the chains, I don't think the house would have burned down, and I think that if Lucy was acting outside the protocol, the rules, and looking like she was trying to connect with this ghost, then George, at this stage in their relationship, would have told her, we're done. You can't do this, and we're leaving. And also, I think he would have seen her take the necklace, and he would have been pissed.
I think he would have noticed, and I also think he wouldn't have, I mean, knowing what we know now, because we've read the books, watched the TV show, etc., we know that the bones were not, and I think this is like the next chapter, we know that the source wasn't the body. The source is the necklace. I think George wouldn't have been so quick to assume the source was the bones. Because all we see is like action and consequence, right? So Lucy throws on the silver net on the body, the head and torso, which covers the necklace and the remains. And then the ghost winks out. So in their eyes, they're like, oh, yeah, that's the remains. It's always the remains. 75% or whatever of cases, the source is the physical remains. I think that George would have questioned if they were the remains or not, you know?
I think he 100% would have. I think he would have been more careful with what they were actually covered, like what the actual source was. I don't think the house would have burned down, so I think they would have had more time to figure out what the actual source was. And I think he would have looked at Miss Hope and been like, move and shape my ass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like...
I think he would have torn her a new one. I also think he would have called total bullshit on where she said she lived, and she was like, oh, it probably wasn't even bad up there. And he'd be like, excuse me, there were 3 plagues in the area, you liar.
True.
And now we're going to move on to the next portion, which is going to be our favorite moment guessing game, where we're each going to guess a moment from the chapters that we covered that we think the other person liked the best. So we're going to guess each other's favorite moments.
Do you want to guess mine first, or do you want me to guess yours?
I know mine. I'm afraid that mine's the same as yours.
I feel like I have an idea of what your favorite part is. I don't know.
I think your favorite part is the bickering on page 34 and 35, where Lockwood says, like, basically, on account of being a leader, it's my responsibility, and Lucy says, to make bad decisions, you're right, I think it is.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes!
That's totally it.
Oh, God.
I literally put bickering heart in my book. But the exchange is just pure gold. Like, especially where he's saying that your head's not in the right place, and Lucy responds with, well, it isn't me that's the problem, is it? And Lockwood's like, what's that supposed to mean? And she's like, the chains? And he's like, oh, God, we got to bring this up again. It's so funny, because it's not even, like, typical bickering for an old married couple. I bicker with my siblings like this sometimes, where any little argument ensues, and you got to bring up that tiny little thing that they did when they were 7.
Yeah, bringing up any past argument for justifications. I am right there with you.
Okay. So I feel like I'm going to get it wrong, and I'm going to be so embarrassed.
Yeah, I'm quite glad I went first and got that right.
I'm
so relieved.
bad at this. I'm nervous. Can I guess 2?
Sure. I'll tell you if the first one's right.
Okay. My first guess is the necklace part, because you love the imagery.
I do like the
that.
imagery. But that is not my favorite part.
Okay, my second guess is the part where the ghost is floating towards her.
Nope.
Dang nabbit. Ah!
Mine is basically the same as yours, except my favorite part is right after the bickering where Lucy's getting all heated and, like, calling him out, and he says, so, how's your anger management going?
So basically, what I'm hearing is that we are the same human, and we picked the same part.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's at the end of my portion. So basically, same part.
It's basically the same part.
But I do like that my other 2 guesses were both parts that we both highlighted and loved.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Also, listeners won't know this, but they will know now. But we share a document beforehand where we write notes, and we write our own notes, so we don't read each other's. But I'm looking through it now, and I'm realizing we wrote the same thing.
Yeah, we made almost word for word, like some of the same exact notes and the same questions.
All right, tune in next time to see if I can redeem myself and guess Alex's favorite part.
Yeah, we'll let you go first next time.
The next part is called Before, and it's chapters 5 through 8.
So in the meantime, read up and make some notes, and then message us and join us on the socials.
We would love to hear from you. What are some of your favorite parts? Were there any other what if questions that you think would be fun to answer? Or maybe you have a different answer to our what if question of the week.
Let us know if you read the foreword as well. Or if, like me, you skipped them.
Did you also cry at the foreword? Do you also think your death glow would be bright?
What would your source be?
Will you also call them biscuits? You know, the correct name for cookies?
No. Oh, God.
Until then, hey Alex.
Hey, Addi.
Thanks for being my bestie.
Thanks for tolerating me.
Tolerating?
Thanks for not ghosting.
I burn for you.
Thanks for listening to TBR.
Be sure to follow us on the socials at Two Besties Read.
Got any suggestions for the other series we should look at? Email us at twobestiesread@gmail.com.
Join us next week as we read
I'm